Well, hey everybody. I am experimenting with picked up and using raw fiber type threads like this 100% rayon, and they're really scientific about the process. I don't know about the science side of things, but I'll tell you this. What I've learned is this stuff is real tricky to try to get that tension balanced so that you're going to get a decent stitch, but you're also not going to keep breaking the thread. Recommended needle for this stuff, if you're using a Schmetz Universal, is going to be a size 80. If you're using an embroidery type needle, they're going to recommend a size 75. So really close on both respects. But the big deal for this stuff when you're trying it out is to try to get that tension again balanced, but not too high that you're going to constantly be breaking the thread. I broke the thread probably about at least 6 or 7 times before I found what I think is a fairly good sweet spot for this particular type of thread. Let me show you what it looks like in case you want to pick it up at Joann's or at your sewing center, wherever you're located. Let's see, get a little bit of music going here. So this is my special little box for the real fancy type threads. And that's kind of what this Sulky thread is. And they come in all different colors. I'll just show you some of the colors I picked out. I have polyester thread. The one on the left is the Sulky brand. Both of them German based, but this is going to be 100% rayon. This is going to be 100% polyester. This one is a lot more frustrating to work with, again, because of the breakage factor. It's rated at a 40 weight thread, but I'll tell you one thing, it is so brittle, it is so delicate, incredibly tricky stuff to work with, again, from a tension standpoint. So I think I would, I like experimenting with new stuff, and these are some really fabulous colors that the Sulky company comes up with. And this is only a small sampling of some of the colors that I picked out. Especially as the holidays are approaching, it's just absolutely spectacular. But when it comes to a thread that is versatile and you're able to sew a wide variety of type of materials, this stuff is a big challenge. And it's also not going to be a suitable thread when it comes to sewing quilting type applications because it breaks so easily. It's just so fragile. But it sure is pretty stuff, isn't it? And that's why I picked a special little box to kind of house it in when I decide to get adventurous enough to pull it out. Like, set this right over here. So again, the balance factor. Let me show you kind of what I've done on the setup of this machine. The other thing I should mention, in fairness to the Sulky company, is that they really are a progressive company when it comes to wanting to apply science and try new things. But again, it's a little bit of a battle when you're setting a machine like this up. You can, if you look at the upper tension, what I've had to tame it down to in order to get that thread not to break. I was up around 5.5, and I had to come all the way down just below 2 before I finally had a little bit of success in being able to stitch down without the thread breaking again and again and again and again and again. But again, you're talking about, even though it's rated at 40 weight, you're talking about 100% rayon. This is great for embroidery and for free motion quilting if you're on the right type of fabric, but you're definitely not going to be able to pull off any type of leather sewing like this. You're just not going to be able to do it. Type thread fan is tough to work with. It just is. Let me try to move the camera a little bit closer. Again, this is a 21E, and Mary brought 2 machines to me. The other one is, what is it? I think it's is it a white? Maybe it's a white. to take a look. Nope, I was wrong. It's a new home. It's a new home. The other one that she has, which is a very vintage new home. And it's got a huge laundry list of needs that it's gonna require in order to put that to use. Oh, hey, Sonny, how are you? Welcome, dear. Good to see you. Yeah, this is a real. What I wanted to experiment on was this material right here. This is kind of a cotton blend. It's a beautiful Christmas style material that you would use maybe as a tree wrap around the base type of thing or something else. And I love the look of this thread. Interestingly, it's a greenish thread, but when you sew it on a cotton blend like this, it almost shows up like it's gold, doesn't it? And this is just one of the stitches that I've tested on this machine so far. But the big challenge, even when I use the right needle, which I seldom ever do, as you guys know, again, what I have in the machine right now is a size 80 Schmetz Universal, which should be okay for this 40 weight, 100% rayon thread. But even then, like I showed you before, I had to tame this tension down all the way below 2 before I could have any success at all with that thread not breaking. Oh my gosh, I have just battled this beast, but it's all well and good. I think I've got it at a point now where I'll be able to do a little bit of stitching off with it and show you kind of what it's doing. Actually, what I want to try real quick though is I want to try some of this holiday vintage velvet ribbon stuff that I picked up. This stuff, I don't even know how old this is, but it's old enough. It looks like it came out of the Target stores back in the day. And this stuff is 29% acrylic, 9%. Wait, 29. These percentages don't add up, but it's an acrylic polyester mix. So let's give this a try and see how this machine does. The machine is perfect right now from a performance standpoint, but adapting it to the sewing needs that we're trying to apply to right now is just boy, oh boy, is it a challenge. Let's try this stuff. Again, what I'm going to be trying right now is this holiday velvet ribbon material, originally sold through Target. I don't know when Target opened up. Does anyone know when the Target stores first opened up? It looks like it's from the early 2000s, maybe like 2007, 2008. But I'll be curious to see if we can sew this off with this 100% rayon without breaking the thread again. Because I'll tell you, I have gotten very, very good at rethreading the needle after breaking this rayon stuff. Has anyone else worked with 100% rayon thread before? And if so, how have you used it? How have you applied it as far as sewing? Because I don't have a lot of experience using this 100% rayon thread by Sulky. Has anyone used this Sulky embroidery thread before? Am I catching you guys drinking coffee or what? Well, let me tell you a little bit about the Sulky company for this thread that we're trying out today. Joyce and Fred Drexler are the founders of this company. And again, it's a German-based company. They mirror and match themselves a lot against Gutermann. And where the Gutermann threads, again, are going to be polyester, these folks on the Sulky side, they are scientists when it comes to developing threads for different applications. Okay, so it looks like Sonny has used this stuff with a stabilizer. Target was not around when Sonny was a youngster. So I don't know how long Target has been in business, but that's originally where this velvet material that we're going to try sewing on was sold. And it looks like Joyce and Fred that developed this Sulky line that, again, they kind of pitted against the Gutermann brand. They even mirror and match their thread stack so it looks identical on the shelf. You can't even tell the two apart until you grab it and you actually look at it to see that it is, in fact, a Sulky brand out of Germany as well. But they have over 4,000 products that they're currently selling under the Sulky name. So it just gives you an idea of how aggressive they are in trying to get their footprint into the marketplace. And the fact that they describe themselves as education innovators. And that's where they incorporate a lot of science into developing threads like this that we're going to be using today. This 40 weight, 100% rayon Sulky thread. Well, I don't know what science they're incorporating into the thread, but you can't use it for quilting. You can only use it for a very limited number of embroidery or free motion type quilting applications, but it's really prone to breaking. It's really, really prone to breaking. So all of that blah, blah, blah. Let's see if we can sew a stitch line without this stuff breaking. That would be nothing short of a miracle. Let's see. Here we go. Again, I've got the upper tension turned all the way down to about 2, if you can imagine. So I might have finally found the sweet spot for this stuff. I might have finally found it, at least when I'm sewing velvet, that is. If I try using it on another application, it may be a total fail. So this is what we just got. Now, if you can see that in the camera or not. And that's one of the decorative stitches that's on this 21E. I think we have, what cam do we have in the back of this machine right now? Looks like we have cam A, but it's one of the revised cams. If you don't know it, when Husqvarna was making cams, they would generate cams like these, right? You can see them in the box here. They would generate cams like these, and then over time, to kind of freshen it up a little bit, they would do a revised edition of these cams. And so it would, instead of just having, say, a letter A, B, or C, or D, or E, it would be, say, a B, I. And they would use the letter I to indicate that there had been a revision of that cam, which usually meant some new types of stitches that they could market to the folks that already had machines, already had cams. So this has an A revised cam in the back of it. And this is one of the stitches. Matter of fact, this is stitch number 4 on that revised cam. And again, we're using a size 80 universal needle, which, according to the makers of Sulky, is a workable solution. This velvet actually has an interesting plastic liner on the back of it, doesn't it? You can see that on the rear of here. And we're looking at the lock stitch. Very, very different. Very different. Well, we're able to get a decent looking stitch. And the settings I have the machine on right now, let me show you the front of the machine again. The settings I have on the machine right now is I've got the tension tamed all the way down to 2. And I've got the stitch length just above 0.5 right now. Kind of right in the middle of the setting between 1 and 0.5 is where I've got it. I could try to go shorter, but I'm concerned we're going to start breaking thread again. This rayon thread is incredibly fragile stuff to work with. Let's see if we can sew off successfully another one of the decorative stitches on Mary's machine and see if we have success. Yeah, I don't think it's shabby at all. I think it's wider than I'd like to do it. I'd like to tighten this up even more. But I'm concerned we're going to start breaking thread again if I push this thread too far. Yeah, the stitch definition, I think, Sonny, is really quite good. Well, let's keep on rolling, see if we can generate another stitch on this velvet material. It's a velvet holiday material that's a mix of polyester and acrylic. Acrylic is what it says on the original packaging. So if you're not familiar with Swedish Beauties, and again, this is a 21E from 1961. This is from 1961, this particular machine as we're looking at it. And these 21Es that came out in the 1960s, they're really fine machines. They're a little bit more prone to having maintenance issues than the earlier class 20 and the earlier class 21 machine that you've seen on this channel a lot, the green machine, the other green machines. But this particular model came out originally with a 1 amp motor, and then to make it even more appealing and more competitive, they ended up adding a 1.5 amp motor to the machine. So this has a lot of reserve power. This one that again that belongs to Mary has a 1.5 amp motor on it. And if we're going to try doing the next stitch that's on this machine, you can see right now we're on setting number 4. If the camera focuses, you can see. Yeah. So we're going to go to setting 3, and the way you do that on these machines is you zero out the stitch width like this, and then you can generally fairly easily slide this slider to the next position, to position 3 where it's at now. You can see that right there. And then you take your stitch width, once you've made that slider move back over to position 4 again is generally where I'll set it. And the lay of the land on these green machines, some people have said they're kind of intimidating. I think they're really quite simple. Right here, you've got feed dog drop, stitch width. This little tab thing right here is for a starting and stopping point if you want to do buttonholes on top of here. You push it again, and it kind of stops and starts as far as executing a buttonhole. Stitch length up here, reverse button. And the tricky thing about these reverse buttons you need to understand is they are designed so that they're a 2-stage reverse button. In other words, if I push it in and up a little bit, it'll actually lock into place. And then if I push it again, right now it's locked in reverse. If I push it again, it then releases. So if you want to kind of go back and forth, you got to make sure that you're not pushing it in the wrong way. Otherwise, it's going to lock in reverse. So again, if you want to lock it, you can kind of just push it in, kind of down a little bit, I guess it technically is. But I've had a couple people contact me that said, my 21E or my 19E is stuck in reverse. Can you fix it for me? A couple of them actually brought the machine into the workshop, and I said, yep, I can fix it. I don't need any tools. And I kind of showed them what they had done is they'd pushed it in and down, and it was locked in reverse. So if you have a 19E or you have a 21E, just realize it's a 2-stage reverse. And if you want to be able to go back and forth very easily, you got to make sure you kind of push it in and up a little bit. And then it goes in and out very nicely. If you happen to push it in and down, it's going to lock in reverse. So just an easy tip so you can avoid a service call, because I'm not going to charge you if you bring it into the workshop and it's that simple. But there's another service center out there that I'm sure will. They'll take advantage of you. So just be aware of that. And then finally, we have this control here, which does a couple of things. One, it's going to give you that slider that allows you to access the different cam features on this machine. It's also going to give you needle position by turning it left. You're going to be in a left needle position. Right, you're going to be in a right needle position. Another, I guess, a tip as far as this particular control, it's only going to give you needle position when your stitch width is down in 0. If you move your stitch width anywhere from between 1 to 4, this control is not going to respond properly. And that's by design, because when you're in a stitch width setting greater than 0, that cam is going to control the output of that needle swing. They don't want you trying to manage it up here when the cam feature in the back of the machine is going to be overriding your desire for where you want that needle position to be. Okay? The other thing to tell you about this machine, and it's true of the other Green Machine series as well, is you've got to have a cam in the back of this machine to do a couple of things. Number one, to generate anything with needle swing, whether it's a zigzag or whether it's one of the cam generated stitches. The other thing you have to be aware of is on these Green machines, that cam in the rear of the machine is going to also set the swing boundaries so that your needle isn't hitting the throat plate. So never operate one of these Green machines, whether it's a 21E like this from 1961 or one of the much earlier versions that also use those black cams, because that black cam in the rear of the machine is going to set the swing boundaries of that needle so that it doesn't go outside of the boundaries and hit and scar that throat plate. And that's really the big deal. I mean, it's easy enough if you break a needle, it's easy enough to put a new needle in. But it's a lot more problematic when you start hitting that throat plate with needles. You start creating scarring on that throat plate opening, and the thread coming out of that bobbin case away from the raceway starts snagging on those little barbs of metal. And all of a sudden, you've got you can have issues of thread breaking, you can have issues of feed, you can have inconsistent stitching as far as the presentation of the stitch. All you one of these black cams in the rear of the machine. Just save yourself the headache. Save yourself the headache of not all of a sudden having thread feed issues because you've created scarring on that throat plate. Okay. All right, let's try doing another stitch line. We've set ourselves up now for stitch number 3, I think it is, on this revised cam A, and we'll see how this 21E again from 1961 does with this task. I'm hoping we can do another stitch line without this 100% rayon thread by Sulky breaking, which I battled. You have no idea how much I battled this. It's been quite a learning experience, as I don't work a lot with 100% rayon type threads. I just don't. All right, let's give this a try and see how we like the look of this. The other thing I didn't mention, and I should have, is I've also made a fine-tune adjustment on the upper tension as well, as far as the take-up spring. These particular upper tensions, I'll just show you real quick. They've got a little tab. It's probably kind of hard to see on the bottom of here. And by sliding this tab one way or the other, you can adjust how far this take-up spring has to swing down in order to complete that stitch cycle. Right now, I've got it about medium range, a little bit above medium range, if you can see that. If you try operating this upper tension with that take-up spring at the highest position, what I experienced, at least using this 100% rayon Sulky type thread out of Germany, is that thread would break every single time after about 4 or 5 stitches. So make that adjustment down here. Again, on the bottom of the upper tension, you're going to see a little plastic tab sticking down. You'll want to drop this take-up spring down so it's about mid-range or in that area. And that way it doesn't have to swing as much to generate that stitch. It's not going to put as much stress on this very delicate 100% rayon thread, and you're probably going to have more success. At least I hope you do. Okay. All right, we're going to try doing stitch number 3 on this revised cam A and see if we can do that entire stitch line without this thread breaking. I hope we can. All right, here we go. Oh, I just realized I'm going to leave it the way it is, but I just made an error. I did not move that stitch width all the way back to maximum. So we're going to run this stitch twice, stitch number 3. Yep, I goofed up. I was showing you the features of that, and I forgot to swing it back. So what we have is a very modest, it looks like a blind hem right now. We're going to stitch this one more time, and I'll set that stitch width at the proper width so you can see how drastically different this stitch will present. But we got all the way down without the thread breaking, which is great news. And this velvet material that we're using again was originally sold at the Target store, and it's 100%. Well, no, it isn't. It's 62% polyester, 29% acrylic. So we're dealing with polyester acrylic with this velvet thread. Plus, it has kind of a plastic backing on it as well. So I'm going to try doing this stitch one more time, but do it at the proper stitch width so we can see how this stitch will look adjusting that stitch width. Okay, so over here, this is where I had the stitch width set. I'm going to adjust it all the way to normally where I would have it, all the way over to 4, and we'll see how this stitch looks in. Yeah, exactly, Gail. Exactly. That's the battle that I've had with this Sulky thread. It's fabulous looking thread. I showed earlier, I don't know if you were here at the time, but I showed earlier my secret little treasure trove of embroidery type threads. And the Sulky colors are just fantastic. Those are a couple of the other spools that I picked up. But this 100% rayon is just so doggone fragile. And it's rated at 40 weight. But I'll tell you one thing, it doesn't have much strength to it at all. And it looks like you battled the same thing. Gail battled the same thing with trying to get that balance. I've had to take this way down in order to try to get a stitch that's going to present well. So let's give this next stitch line a try. Again, I increased the stitch width from right around 1.5 all the way to 4. So we're going to be doing a lot more needle swing. Hopefully we don't break this thread again. But I've, again, if you didn't see it before, I've dialed the upper tension all the way down to just below 2. That's the only way I could get this stuff to not break. And also, again, the take-up spring, I've used that little adjuster on the bottom to bring it down to about mid-range so that it's not having to pull quite as hard against that 100% rayon thread. And that helped as well with this thread not breaking. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll do this next stitch line and see if we can get down the stitch line again without this stuff breaking. All right, here we go. Oh, that was so wonky. I was way off. That was not a blind hem. That was a 3-point zigzag is what that is. Oh boy, did I miss the mark on calling that stitch. But it was, you know, when you throw the stitch width off that far, you can see the difference between these two stitches. That's a 3-point zigzag on the left. It's identical to this stitch, but on this one, we had it set at about 1.5 on stitch width. Here we have it set at 4. And what a drastic difference that is, right? So it just goes back to what I say all the time. If you decide to goof around with stitch width and stitch length, you can take a stitch and make it look absolutely like another stitch. I mean, these are the identical stitch number 3 on revised Cam A for this 1961 Viking Husqvarna 21E, but they're look at them. They don't look anything alike. They don't look anything alike, and they're the identical stitch. And again, we're sewing on this velvet material, perfect material as we're getting closer to the holidays, right? It's the perfect material to be, trying out and doing different projects with. And again, this greenish colored sulky thread, 100% rayon, when you put it on red, it really shows up with almost a golden appearance, doesn't it? It almost shows up looking like a gold style thread, but it's not. It's absolutely green. But again, it just blows my mind. These two stitches right here are the same stitch, the top row and the middle row. Absolutely the same stitch. Stitch width has a huge impact, as does stitch length, on what you get as far as the stitch output, right? And this velvet material we're working with, again, has a plastic backing on it. So that's adding a little bit of a dimension. That's the kind of a nervous factor as well, as to how far we can push this 100% rayon thread before it starts breaking again. But we're going to keep pushing it. We're going to keep pushing it for right now, at least. So let's go to the next decorative stitch option on this 1961 21E. This is what we've done so far. We've done this 3-point stitch. Originally, I did it with the wrong stitch width, and we got this stitch line in the middle here. This was stitch number 4, I think. Yeah, this is stitch number 4 over here on revised Cam A for this 21E. And then I adjusted the stitch width back to 4, and we got this beautiful 3-point zigzag style stitch over here. So what are we going to do next? What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to position 2 and see what kind of stitch output we're going to get there. And again, the way I'd recommend doing it so you don't stress that mechanism in the rear of the machine is you recalibrate it. You take this stitch width down to 0, then take that slider and move it to the next position. So I'm going to be moving it to position 2 now, which is a lot easier to do when you have 2 hands. There we go. I finally got it. And then you don't forget, like me, and you take that stitch width back to 4 again. The last time I goofed up and I didn't do that. So let's see what we get this time and see if we can continue successfully stitching this velvet style material that's a mix of polyester and acrylic. And again, we're using a Schmetz Universal size 80 sewing needle, which is what the Sulky people recommend you use. They also said you can use 2 other needles as well using this 40 weight, 100% rayon Sulky thread. You can either use what I'm using, a size 80 universal needle. You can also use the size 75 Microtex needles that you've seen me use on this channel before. And then last but not least, you can also use the Schmetz embroidery needle, which is a size 11, a 7511. Any of those needles, according to the Sulky people, are acceptable to use with their thread. So if you started out like me, I'm a diehard size 90-14 Schmetz Universal guy, okay? If you've tried using the Sulky thread using a size 90-14 by Schmetz, a universal needle, you probably had that thread break quite a bit, as I did originally. And then I all of a sudden said, well, I should probably see what the Sulky people recommend. And that's where I found out that they are recommending a Schmetz size 80 universal, or one of those other 2 needles that I just mentioned, the Microtex or the embroidery needle size 7511 by Schmetz as well. Okay. All right, let's try doing this next stitch line and seeing if we can keep our momentum going of being able to use this real tricky 100% rayon thread without breaking it with our current setup. Okay. All right, keep your fingers crossed. Here we go. Well, wow, we did it again. Amazing. Amazing. And that's what we just generated right over there, which looks a lot like our other stitch, doesn't it? It looks really, really close. They look identical almost. I wonder if on this revised cam, if they've got two stitches that are almost a mirror and match of each other, because that's certainly what I'm seeing. They are virtually identical. They are pretty much identical. And that again is stitch number 2 on this revised A cam that Mary sent with the machine. How interesting, huh? How interesting. But that's the thing with revisions, isn't it? You just never know. You just never know. But at least we made it down that stitch line using this tricky rayon thread. Again, 40 weight, according to Sulky. And we generated a solid lock stitch. Actually, we look a little bit looser on that stitch, don't we? With that revised stitch that we just did. You look at the two of these, it almost looks like on this last stitch line we did, we would have to bump up that upper tension just slightly in order to tighten that stitch up. It's a little bit on the loose side. But the top stitch is just spot on. So our bobbin case is doing a real good job of managing that stitch. All right, now I'm curious. We're going to go to stitch number 1 on this revised cam A and see what stitch we get for that at least. And again, this velvet material that we're sewing, I'm kind of feeling like we're getting close enough to the holidays that I can start using more Christmassy type materials, at least more of the brighter red ones. So we're going to move to this next stitch and see what kind of stitch we get this time. So again, this is your stitch selector for cams. What I recommend again is that you kind of take that stitch width down to 0 so that that slider moves a little bit more easily. I'm going to go ahead and slide it to 1 now. I'm going to move our stitch width back to 4. And let's see what kind of stitch we get this time with this revised cam A. Take up arm at the highest position. All right, let's give this a go. I hope we can finish this last stitch on the revised cam A. We've sewed all of these successfully without the thread breaking. And I broke the thread so many times before I finally made these adjustments for a setup that should be successful. Let's hope it works on this last stitch as well, okay? All right, here we go. Well, I'm excited to say we got all the way down. And again, another success. This is one that we just sewed right here on the far end. And then you can look across the line of the other stitching that we've used. Again, a size 80 universal Schmetz needle. And we're using this Sulky 40 weight embroidery thread today on this 1961 Viking Husqvarna 21E, again, powered by a 1.5 amp motor. So if we switch to more of a standard type thread, more of the Coates and Clark stuff I usually use, this machine, don't be deceived by this delicate sewing. It'll be able to blast leather just like anything else. And then I would step it back up again to a Schmetz universal size 9014 or a Schmetz leather needle. Well, we're getting some real good success. And again, the only way I was able to do this is by adjusting that upper tension way down and by adjusting that take up spring swing to a mid-range instead of the highest range that it can go to. Because when it's at the highest range, it's stressing that 100% rayon thread so much that it was breaking almost every single time.
almost every single time. So it gets a little bit tricky sometimes when you're working with a new type of thread, especially the rayon stuff. Well, I'm gonna keep rolling through this and see whether or not we can put another one of these cams that Mary sent with a machine. We're gonna keep working with this this velvet style material because we found a sweet spot with this stuff, and see whether or not we can apply some of these other cams and see what kind of stitch output we get with this, and see if we can keep using this Sulky 40 weight embroidery thread without it breaking. That's the big deal when you're working with this particular type of thread. I'm going to throw this stuff to the back, and we're going to keep on plugging forward. And again, whenever you're changing out cams on any of these green machines, you always want to move that slider all the way to the rear, which is position 5 on here, okay? I'm going to reset that again so we can move it very easily. Again, on all of these black cams, position 5 is always going to be a zigzag. That's the way they've set them up. Because, again, you have to have one of these cams in these green machines to set those swing boundaries and to give yourself a zigzag capacity. Otherwise, if you try operating this machine, even unthreaded, with no cam in the rear, and you set the stitch width down here to 4, you're going to notice that the needle doesn't move at all. It just won't move. It's like the program is broken. So, but when you're changing out cams, always move it to the position 5. That's going to give the cam stack the furthest reach back so you can remove it more safely, again, without stressing any of the mechanisms that are in the back of the machine, okay? So what I'm taking out of the machine right now is this revised Cam A. You can see the little I next to it again. So if you have black cams and you had like an A and then an AI, you know now what that I signifies. It means that what they did is they took the original Cam A and they revised it. As you could see, those two stitches were almost a mirror match of each other. So I'm not sure if this revision was the best one on the part of Husqvarna, but who am I to say, right? So I'm going to go ahead and throw this to the rear and grab another one of these cams that Mary sent with this 1961 Husqvarna. So I've got an option of a revised Cam C, a Cam B, and then what is this other one? A Cam C. So I'll put these kind of in order. I've got a regular C. I've got a revised C. This again is going to be a regular C cam, a revised C cam, and then finally a B cam. We'll probably try all of these with this ribbon material just so we can say we did it. So I'm going to grab this regular. Actually, I'll do them in order. Why don't I do them in order? Since we just did a revised, Cam A, we'll go to a B now. So I'm going to do this B cam next. Put that in the back of the machine, and we'll see if we can continue to have success in sewing this velvet material that, again, is a combination of polyester and acrylic. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the rear of the machine right now. And if you're not familiar with the back of these machines, this is kind of what it looks like back there. Not sure if I can do this one-handed, but I'll give it a try. So you flip this little arm down that's spring-loaded, kind of slide that cam onto the stack, and you have to kind of work it a little bit because there's a little bit of a retainer pin that you have to kind of get past. Okay, it looks like I just got it into position. And then kind of release that spring, and then you might have to pull the cam out just slightly to get that arm to snap into place. Okay, close your door, you're good to go. And again, if you're just joining this live stream now, we're using 100% rayon thread today by Sulky. Sulky, again, is a German-based company, just like Gutermann. As a matter of fact, they've taken their thread stack and they basically are a mirror and match of each other. So if you go into a fabric store and you know the look of the Gutermann brand and you just go by sight, you don't look at it real quick, maybe you're in a hurry, you might end up grabbing the Sulky brand, which is also made in Germany, but it's not going to be Gutermann, because Gutermann is, again, like I showed you guys before, Gutermann is going to be on the opposite spectrum of threads. Their threads are going to be like this, which is 100% polyester. This is a Gutermann thread. But again, if you're in a hurry and you're going to the shelf, other than the real bright color difference, look at that thread stack. They're like identical. So you gotta be careful if you go into a store. The other thing you'll find is that the Gutermann's threads are generally going to come in 100 meters, which equates to about 110 yards. The Sulkies are going to come on spool threads of about 250 yards or 225 meters. So you're going to get a lot more thread with a Sulky, but again, it's going to be a rayon type thread, 100% rayon instead of 100% polyester. Okay. So the Gutermann is nice because you got a lot more versatility in using this thread. The rayon is a lot more fragile, a lot more prone to breaking. And if you're doing quilting, especially, you can use Gutermann all day long. If you try quilting with this 100% rayon, you're going to be a very frustrated sewer because this stuff is going to break left and right. It just is. Okay. All right. So we have Cam B in the back of the machine now. Cam B on the series of Husqvarna type sewing machines is one of my favorite. It's a fabulous, fabulous cam for decorative stitching. So let's cut another piece of this. Originally sold at Target in the early 2000s, I want to say. So this velvet stuff that I'm using is probably a good 20 years old. Let's cut another piece of this and give this a try. Try to see if we can sew Cam B successfully with the current setup that we have. Again, I'm using a Schmetz Universal Size 80, which is what Sulky recommends for using this type of thread. All right, let's give this a try. The other thing I need to remember to do, I'm already set on 5, right? Because I extended that stack all the way back, but we don't want to do a standard zigzag. We want to get into the embroidery type stitches straight away. So I've got to take my stitch width and then move this slider over to position 4, assuming I can do it. And that is the thing with these cam stacks. They sometimes stick a little bit, don't they? All right, I'm at position 4 now. So I've got to remember now to take my stitch width back to 4 again, okay? Let's see what this first, or I shouldn't say first, let's see what this 4th stitch looks like on Cam B for this 1961 Viking Husqvarna 21E that belongs to Mary out of the state of Michigan, all right? And I hope we can continue to stitch without this sulky thread breaking. It's really prone to breaking. Even though I've tried to set this up so we would have success, you just don't know. So let's give this a go. Here we go. And I'm going to turn this music down a little bit as well. Hold on. This machine is just running so silky smooth right now. It's really a pleasure to sew with, even in spite of this rayon thread that's been giving me a lot of headache. This again is going to be Cam B that we're using right now, Cam B. Cam B. Let's see what this looks like. I'm just pleased we made it all the way down the stitch line without it breaking. And we could obviously shorten this up more. We could easily shorten this up. But I'm just a little bit leery about how far I want to push this thread. I think I'll just shorten it just a little bit for our next stitch line that we do, but a real pretty on this. And we also got you can see that this velvet is lined with kind of like almost like a plastic layer on the back. And we still got good stitch quality. I might bump up that upper tension just slightly to tighten that up a little bit more. But again, I'm leery about how far I want to push that upper tension with this 100% rayon sulky thread being so prone to breaking. It's so prone to breaking. But on the top of the velvet, we've got a decent looking stitch presentation from stitch number 4 on cam B. All right, let me clip the threads and let's go to the next stitch, see what we think. I've got the camera real close to the free arm, so I keep bumping it. Hopefully you're not getting seasick. Yeah, I like that stitch. That again is stitch number 4 on cam B. Now we're going to go to stitch number 3, see what we think of that. And again, if you've just joined the stream, we're using a size 80 universal needle by Schmetz today. We're sewing with 100% rayon Sulky embroidery thread from Germany. Again, Sulky kind of goes head to head with Gutermann. Even their thread stack on the shelf looks identical. So if you're in a rush going through a fabric store and you just grab what looks like Gutermann, you might end up with Sulky. You still have a German-based thread, which is great, but you may end up with 100% rayon instead of 100% polyester. Okay, let's make that adjustment to go to this next stitch, okay? So again, if you just gotten a Husqvarna Viking green machine and you're like, I don't know a thing about these suckers, let me show you at least how to change between stitches when you're working with that cam stack function. So you take your stitch width down to 0 first. What that does is there's a little reader finger in the back of the machine, and it retracts that reader finger so that this slider is going to move more easily. At least that's the theory. So right now we're on 4. We're now going to go to 3. And then take your stitch width back to 4 again after that. And again, our stitch length that I would recommend most of the time when you're using the cam functions on these green machines is going to be right around 0.5. We could go a little bit lower than that, but I don't know how far I want to push this 100% rayon sulky thread. So we're gonna be a little bit cautious here. We've had a number of successful stitch offs, no thread breaking. I'm getting kind of stoked now. I'm getting kind of stoked about the applications of this sulky thread. So let's see what happens. Again, we're going to be doing stitch number 3 on cam B. So if you've got a cam B for your green machine, you can try duplicating the same thing using this 100% rayon sulky thread. All right, here we go. Right after I get my take up arm all the way up. There we go. I'm intentionally keeping my speed down, because of how fragile this thread is. Perfect. All right, so this is stitch number 3 on cam B that we just did. You can see it there on the far left. It's a lovely stitch, and we could certainly change the look of it slightly by tightening up that stitch length even more. But again, working with rayon thread, it's a very fragile thread. It's very prone to breaking. And so I'm trying not to push the limits just too far. You know what I mean? I don't want to push it too far. But it's doing a decent job on this velvet material. Again, this velvet material originally was sold by Target in the early 2000s. And it's a combination of acrylic and polyester, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, acrylic and polyester. About 29% acrylic and about 62% polyester is what we're working with. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next stitch, see what we get. And Husqvarna, when they were making cams, they sometimes would do a revised cam, like that first cam that we did on this live stream, Cam A. Right now we're using the original Cam B, which again tends to be one of my favorite cams to work with. They've got some real pretty stitches on there. All right, let's get this back into position and we'll move on to that next stitch. So again, changing between stitches is fairly easy. I recommend again that you go ahead and move your stitch width down to 0. Again, it pulls that little reader finger back so that it's easier to move this slide. We're going to go from 3 now to 2. And again, when you look at these numbers, always realize if you're on 5, doesn't matter what cam you have in the back of the machine, 5 is always going to be a zigzag. So on each of the cams, you basically have 4 decorative ornamental type stitches, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 5 is always going to be a zigzag, okay? So now that we moved it, now we got to remember to put our stitch width back to 4. That's normally where I'll set it. All right, let's go on to this next stitch and see what we get. See what we get. Take up arm all the way up. So this again is going to be stitch number 2 on Cam B. Here we go. And again, I have my, I'll show you on the upper tension again. I've got my upper tension turned way down because I was having the thread break continuously. I couldn't even sew like 1 or 2 stitches without the thread breaking. So that's kind of almost a snaky pattern one, isn't it? I like that one a lot, the one we just did. And again, we could tighten it up more. We could certainly tighten this stitch up. We could tighten any of these stitches up more by just dialing down our stitch length below 0.5. But I'm really pleased overall. Again, this velvet material is acrylic and polyester. That adds a little bit more challenge to the equation along with the 100% rayon thread. So I'm really pleased so far with how this 1961-21E is managing a fairly challenging setup. It's a fairly challenging setup. I would be curious, and I might not do it during this live stream, but I'd be curious if we shifted from the Schmetz size 80 universal needle to this Schmetz embroidery needle, which is a little bit smaller. It's a size 75 instead of a size 80. How we would do in delivering stitch definition and clarity of stitch. I think we might be able to step it up a little bit higher than we are right now with this universal needle, but I'm still happy with the results we're getting. And I'm incredibly happy that we're successfully doing it without the thread breaking. I don't know if any of you other folks have used rayon thread before, 100% rayon, but for being rated at a 40 weight, oh my goodness gravy, this stuff is like sewing with eggshells. It's like sewing with eggshells. So if we can continue to get stitch lines without the thread breaking, I will be happy, happy, happy. So I didn't show you the snaky stitch, lock stitch on the back. Overall, okay. I'm pleased with it. Again, considering we have a plastic backing on the rear, but I would probably tighten it up just a little bit more, just to tighten up that lock stitch more if I were going to be sewing a ton of this velvet material. But all in all, a good looking lock stitch with a very challenging setup. And again, the top stitch is just spot on. I like the look of that a lot on this velvet material, especially as like I said, as we're getting closer to the holidays. I love sewing with colors like this. This green shows up as gold against this red background, so it's kind of cool. Kind of cool how it plays off of that. So let me get this set up for our next stitch line. Again, we're going to be moving our slider, and we're going to be moving over to stitch number 1. I kind of do them out of order, don't I? Maybe the next cam I'll do it in a proper order. But you can see right now we're on number 2. So I'm going to take my stitch width, I'm going to zero it out. Then I'm going to take our slider to the last, or in this case, I guess technically the first position, stitch 1 on cam B. And then remember to take my stitch width back to 4 again. Let's see what we think of this one. This will be our last stitch on cam B. Kind of have that crooked a little bit. And I sew crooked naturally, so I probably should straighten it out before I start. Take up arm at the highest position. And I'm gonna take a risk here and shorten that stitch length even a little bit more, just a hair. So we're right about spot on 0.5 right now. And again, if you join the live stream a little bit late, we're working with the Sulky brand embroidery thread, 100% rayon, and it's supposed to be rated at a 40 weight, but it is really, really delicate stuff to work with. And so if I didn't show you before or haven't shown you recently in the live stream, I've taken that upper tension all the way down to 2, which is ridiculous. I mean, I've taken it all the way down to 2. And then again, on these green machines, you're going to see that there's a fine adjuster for that take-up spring on the bottom of here. It's going to be a little plastic tab that you can slide left or right to adjust how far that take-up spring has to swing when you're sewing. And I have it right about at the mid-range right now, because when I had it at the highest point like I normally have it, it was breaking this 100% rayon thread left and right. So I've lowered it down so the movement of this spring is restricted quite a bit, and it's stressing that 100% rayon thread a lot less. We're having more success, as evidenced here by doing these 3 stitch lines without the thread breaking, which is like, yeah, yay! So let's give it a go and see again what we get on this final stitch on cam B, okay? All right, here we go. Just checking my settings real quick to see that I didn't goof up. And again, I'm really holding that speed back. I suppose I could use the slow gear, couldn't I? But I think even the slow gear, I'd have to take it at a slower speed, I should say. And again, this velvet material I'm using is polyester and acrylic. Oh, I ended in the down position. I was aiming for the top position, but I didn't do it. Okay, so this is the stitch line that we just did on the far left there, which I think that's a spectacular stitch, don't you? I think that's an absolutely lovely stitch. You can imagine that, say, on a velvet wraparound on the bottom of your Christmas tree, kind of using that as one of the decorative stitches as edge work. I think it would be absolutely spectacular. It's a beautiful stitch. Probably one of my favorite stitches we've done thus far. Oh, okay. Emma, I apologize. I have not been looking at the chat. I do see your chat comments. They are coming through. I'm just really intently focusing on the machine right now. So I'm not ignoring anybody that's writing chat remarks. I'm just trying to finish up this velvet sewing, hopefully successfully without breaking the thread again, with this 100% rayon by Sulky. So, all right, let me see if I can advance the thread. And we're going to move on to, I think we've got cam C. I think we have a cam C, and I don't remember what the other cam is in there. So again, when you're working with a polyester acrylic material, nailing the top stitch, this is our last stitch line right down here on the bottom, is not nearly as much of a challenge as getting a balanced lock stitch, okay? Our top stitching here looks really solid between the revised cam A we used and on the earlier stitches, I should say, right here, and the cam B that we're using now. But getting that lock stitch balanced is a little bit more of a challenge. And as I'm looking at the lock stitch, all in all, it's okay. But I think we're a little bit on the loose side right now with the lock stitch for these cam B stitches we've done so far. So if I were really adventurous and I wanted to see how far I could push that 100% rayon sulky thread from Germany, I would probably tighten this up just a little bit more. But I'm going to leave things alone for right now and see if we can get through the rest of the cam stitching. And then I can work with the customer in fine tuning this if they decide to take, some of this velvet material back with them and see what they can do with it. Okay. But overall, we're getting some really, really good results with a tricky setup again. A tricky setup considering this rayon thread is so fragile to work with. You can't use it for quilting successfully. You can only use it for some free motion quilting, but you better be choosing that material you're using very carefully and making some really fine adjustments on that upper tension, or you're going to be breaking thread more than you're going to be sewing thread. So there you go. I'm going to throw this to the rear as well, since we've just gotten through, and I probably should mark these before I forget, or I'm going to forget which is which. Hold on a second. Okay, so this one we just finished is going to be cam B. I'm going to put a B on there. And this is revised cam A is what this is. So I'm going to put an AI. Again, when Husqvarna was making their cams and they did a revision, they would usually put a little I symbol next to it like that. And that would tell you that you have a revised cam. So now we're going to move on to cam C and see what we can do with that. We'll throw our sew-offs to the back. I'm excited, though. I'm excited about the fact that we finally have a setup that's working, because Gail had said she tried some of this sulky thread and she ran into a wall with this stuff. And maybe others have had immediate success with that, but I doubt it, because it's incredibly tricky stuff to work with. It just is. So I'm going to get our materials set so we're ready to jump into a sew-off after we change out the cam that we have in the back. And again, when you're changing out cams on these green machines, what I recommend is that you zero out that stitch width, because when you turn it to 0, what it does is it takes that little reader finger in the rear of the machine on the cam stack and it pulls it back so that it's not making contact with the cam anyway. But then we have to, after we do that, we have to take this slider and we have to move it all the way to 5 so that that cam stack is fully extended and we can remove that cam more safely. Again, some delicate parts in the back of the machine, and we just don't want to force anything and risk breaking it. So I'm going to open up the rear of the machine now and take out cam B. Again, this is cam B that we just did that stitching with. Hopefully that's focusing. I think it's trying to focus. There we go. And now I'm going to grab the next cam out of the box that Mary sent with the machine. So what do we have? Actually, we have 2 different C cams. We've got a standard C, and then we've got a revised C. And again, you can tell the difference straight away because the revised C is going to have one of those little eyes after it. See that? So we're going to use the regular cam C first, and then we're going to go to the revised cam C. And we've already used cam B, so we only have 2 more cams to use. I got to put this in the back of the machine first, though. And I've already shown you how to do that earlier in the live stream if you want to look at that. It's not difficult at all. Just gently rotating it, getting it to seat into place, and then getting that little arm to lock in. There we go. I think I got it locked in properly. All right, I'm going to close the back. And let's see what we think of cam C now. Cam C is also a lovely cam. But the thing we have to remember, first of all, like I've said, position 5 is always going to be a zigzag. I'm not concerned about sewing a zigzag right now using this 100% rayon because the other stitching that we're doing has a lot of needle swing already. I want to concentrate on the embroidery stitches since we're using a Sulky 40 weight embroidery thread, 100% rayon. So let's move it to position 4. First of all, I have to move this and recalibrate it, don't I? There we go. So now I'm at position 4. I'm going to take my stitch width back to 0, or back to 4 rather. I'm on 0 right now. And now I'm ready to try stitch number 4 on cam C. Yeah, just double checking that I had cam C and not revised cam C in there. All right, let's give this a try, see what we think. So again, our setup is this. If you just joined the live stream, our setup is a size 80 universal Schmetz needle. The thread we're using is German-made Sulky, which is a 40 weight embroidery thread, and it's 100% rayon. Very delicate stuff. Very, very delicate, very prone to breaking, especially if you don't adjust that upper tension way down. So let's try this stitch and see what we think. Here we go. And again, this material we're using is a combination of polyester and acrylic, originally sold at Target in the early 2000s. It's a pretty stitch too. And again, I could tighten it up more, but I'm being a little bit cautious here, not trying to push this 100% rayon thread quite too far. But it's a lovely stitch. I'll go ahead and pull it off and we can look at it a little bit more closely. So this is the stitch line that we just did. Let me clip these other threads on the other side too. And again, I have that upper tension way, way, way down. So this is again off of cam C, and this is stitch number 4 that we just did. I should move it up and so you can actually see it, right? Try and look at my monitor at the same time so I can see if I have it lined up. So I don't know, does anyone have a name for this stitch? What would y'all call this stitch? It's almost like a set of stairs almost going up, isn't it? I guess we could call it a stair stitch. It's easy enough to say. Decent lock stitch, but again, because I have the upper tension so far down, it's almost a little bit on the loose side. I would tighten this up if I were going to be using this on a product. But no major looping, just needs a little bit of a tweak up. And again, I haven't worked a lot with this 100% rayon, so we have a winning solution right now with being able to do these stitch offs without the thread constantly as before. And again, when I first started experimenting with this earlier today, 9014 Schmetz universal needle, like I often do, and it was absolute failure for this rayon type thread. This rayon thread did not like that size 9014 needle at all. And then I finally was smart. Sometimes guys are not real smart. They'll want to do it their way and they won't look for an answer like a lady will probably more readily. So I finally went to the Sulky site, and that's where they said, hey, dummy, don't use a 9014, even though you love it. Use a size 80 universal, or you can go with a size 75 embroidery style needle, and that'll work just as well. Actually, I think it would probably work even better. But that's what we got with this stitch right here. This is stitch number 4 again on cam C. So without a lot of blah, blah, blahing, let's go on to the next stitch on cam C and see if we can continue to have success with this setup that we have. Again, 40 weight Sulky embroidery thread, 100% rayon, and we're using a size 80 Schmetz universal needle, which is what Sulky recommends. All right, let's see if I can get this lined up so you can see the needle. There we go. All right, so what I'm doing off camera right now, because you've seen me do it several times already, I'm taking that stitch width down, I'm taking our slider and I'm moving it to position 3. Give me just a second. Oh, that's right. I did. I'm glad I checked that. I didn't have it seated quite right on there in the back. I'm glad we had success in sewing that stitch. Hold on just a second. All right, let's see if that works a little bit more smoothly now. Oh yeah, that's a happier camper. Okay, so I've set it on stitch number 3 finally. After all of that blah, blah, blah. Let's check this out. All right, again, we're using cam C. Cam C with this Viking Husqvarna 21E from 1961. Here we go. Up position. I love it when that happens. So this is the stitch that we just did. Again, this is stitch number 3 on cam C. And we could get a different look if we ended up shortening the stitch length even more, but it's taking on a good form as it is right now. And again, we're dealing with a thread that I have little or no experience with. I haven't dealt a whole lot with 100% rayon. And so this is kind of a little bit of a learning curve as well, is why I decided to do this live stream. But it is a lovely looking stitch. Go ahead and pull this out and we'll take a closer look at it. So this is the stitch that we just did, the top one. And again, this is off of cam C. And we're working with 100% rayon thread. And we've got a size 80 universal needle in there. So you can kind of see what we have going on as far as the look. Lock stitch. All in all, I'm pleased with the lock stitch. But again, I've got the upper tension down to almost a little bit below 2 right now, so that this thread doesn't keep breaking. And that's what Sulky recommends, is really, really backing off that upper tension so that it doesn't create a stress on that 100% rayon thread. and keep snapping it, which is what I was doing initially. So we're getting some good movement as far as being able to go through these embroidery stitches on this 1961 Husqvarna 21E, and we're not having, and I shouldn't say that too quickly, should I? We're not having any thread breaking issues at this point with the current setup. All right, so let me go to the next stitch, which is going to be stitch number 2 on cam C. Take our slider all the way down. Grip on there. This particular cam had a little bit of a burr on it, but I didn't think it would create problems, but apparently it is a little bit. Little burr is creating a little bit of a problem for me. I'll have to let the customer know too, because that will become a point of frustration for them very quickly, as they can't move that slider because that cam has a flaw on it. So let's see. And there it goes again, beautifully. To see if maybe I can sand that down. But so we just moved it to position 2, just double checking, 4, 3, yep, 2 should be the correct one. Then I'll move my stitch width back to 4 again. So this again is going to be stitch number 2 on cam C. Let's see what we think of this one. And again, this velvet material is polyester and acrylic. And we're using 100% rayon Sulky thread from Germany today. So that stitch on the far, that's almost going to be a sunburst style stitch that we're looking at there. Kind of change my camera angle just a little bit. There we go. So those are the 3 stitches we've done so far. Stitch number 4, stitch number 3, stitch number 2 off of cam B for this 21E from 1961. And all in all, I'm pleased with the fact that I finally was able to find a setup that would allow this machine to sew successfully with this tricky, sulky 100% rayon thread without constantly breaking. The thread would, when I was getting this first kind of wetting my feet with this a little bit, it would just break left and right. I got to become quite good at threading this machine. Let's just say that. All right, so let me clip these threads and then we'll take a look at these. And we do have a revised cam C that I'd like to try as well, just to see if they'd made any changes to the stitches. I think that would be kind of cool to check that out. So this again is just cam C. Let's take a look at it like this, and we'll kind of look at it down. There we go. I think I finally have it lined up. And I didn't sew incredibly straight, but I did pretty good. So this again is stitch 4, 3, and 2 off of cam C. Some beautiful stitches. Beautiful stitches. But again, this velvet material is probably about as tricky as the thread is to work with, because this velvet material is a mix of polyester and acrylic. Take a look at that lock stitch. A decent lock stitch. Actually, all of these are decent lock stitches. But again, once I got a little bit more confident working with this 100% rayon type thread by Sulky, I probably would tighten this up just a little bit more. I would want that lock stitch just to be a little bit tighter than it is right now. But all in all, a decent looking stitch. So we've got one more stitch to do on cam C, And then we're going to move on to our final revised Cam C and then wrap this live stream up. And this time I'll just do it off camera. I'm not even going to switch the camera angle. I'll just go ahead and move us to position 1, and we'll do this last stitch. Okay, so this is our final stitch, stitch number 1 on Cam C. See what you think of this one. All right, here we go. Yes, up position again. Hey! So this is the one that we just sewed on the far left, which is a lovely stitch. I like that one a lot. You look at the 4 rows that we did. Again, we started with this one over here, stitch number 4, 3, 2, and now stitch number 1 on Cam C. And again, depending on where you set your stitch width, depending on how far you decide you want to push 100% rayon thread by Sulky before it starts breaking on you, that will change the look of these stitches quite a bit as well. Plus, like I said, they also said you can use a size 75 11 embroidery needle, and I think that we could even step up the stitch definition and the stitch presentation further if we went to an embroidery needle. Right now we're just using a standard Schmetz universal size 80. So it is what it is. And we've gotten some decent looking. Yeah, I agree, Emma. I think it does kind of look like a snake stitch, doesn't it? Yeah, they're all lovely stitches. And again, we could tighten them up a little bit more, but I've got some success here with this Sulky embroidery 100% rayon thread, and I don't want to push it too far too fast. You know what I mean? I don't have a lot of experience with this thread, and based on the little glimpse I've seen of the chat so far, I haven't had other than Gail, I haven't had anyone else that I've seen, at least, and I may have missed it because I'm not looking intently at the chat. But I haven't seen too many other people jump in and say, "Oh, I've used Sulky embroidery 100% rayon thread a ton, and it's so easy to work with." I haven't seen anybody jump on the bandwagon to make that proclamation. I think this is, I've worked with a fairly good range of. Oh, actually, we're at the done. This is Cam C. I worked with a fairly good range of types of threads, and this is tricky stuff. All right, so this is our Cam C now. So far, if you've joined the chat kind of late, or joined the live premiere, I should say. This is what we've done so far. Didn't clip all my threads over there. This is what we've done so far on this 1961 Viking Husqvarna 21E. Okay. So far, this is what we've done. You can see them in the shot, I think. We've done Cam AI, which is a revised A Cam. We've done Cam B, and we've done Cam C as well. So you can see we've got some beautiful stitching. We really do, and that is the thing to say about this carefully engineered. Again, they're deeply embedded in the idea of using science to develop their threads at Sulky, and they make some beautiful looking thread. Once you can get a machine set up that is suitable, you can all of a sudden. Oh, hey, Gregory. You can all of a sudden discover the greatness of this thread. It's a very tricky thread to work with. I'm just saying that straight up. It's a very tricky thread to work with. But once you get a setup that's workable like we have now, we have had all of this success on this live stream between the revised Cam A, Cam B, Cam C. We only have one more cam that I'm going to use on this live stream, and it's the revised version of Cam C over here. So I'll be interested to see what that ends up generating. So let's check it out. I'll move these to the rear, and we'll see what we can do with the revised Cam C. So I'm going to extend that cam stack all the way back and take out this Cam C that has a little bit of a burr on it, and it's causing a little bit of binding. It's causing a little bit of binding, which makes it more difficult to move that slider. And then I'm going to take out our Cam C revised from the case that Mary from Michigan sent with the machine. And that's this cam right here. You can see it has that CI, which tells us straight away that it's a revised cam. That's what that little I signifies. If you ever get a cam for your green machine and it has a little I like that next to it, that's telling you that it's a revision of the original cam. So we're going to try that one next. First of all, I'll put these other two cams back in. I'm not likely to lose them, but if I keep them all together, I'll be less likely to lose them. And we're going to get this revised Cam C into the rear of the machine. All right, revised Cam C is in the rear of the machine. It really is quite simple. And then, again, we don't want to start with a zigzag, which is in position 5 on all of the cams. So we want to move that over to position 4 right there. And then we're going to move our stitch width back to 4. And I need to cut some more velvet. Cut some more velvet so we're ready to put this machine to the test again. And this, again, is the velvet I'm using right here. If you can see it in the shot. It originally, again, was sold back in the early 2000s by Target. And you can see back then for this huge roll of velvet, and this roll is probably across, and the top, you're looking at the circumference size, is probably about 6 or 7 inches. Well, I can actually tell you. That way I don't have to guess. Maybe even bigger than that. Nope, I was pretty close. 6.5 inches. 6.5 inches. So that's a lot of velvet. That's a lot of velvet. So let's cut another strip of this. Again, this velvet is going to be a combination of polyester and acrylic, which are also, they sometimes can be a little bit tricky materials to work with. So we've got a tricky thread and we've got tricky fabric that we're working with today with this velvet style material. I just thought I'd use some velvet since we're getting so close. We're getting so doggone close to the holidays, and a lot of people are thinking about velvety type materials. You know what I mean? They just are. So let's get this set up and see what we think of the revised version of Cam C. And again, my setup for this, if you want to try to duplicate it, again, we're using this 40 weight Sulky embroidery thread on the back. Again, it mimics the look and design of the thread stack with Gutermann. So if you're in a rush and you're going through a store and you decide, hey, I'm going to grab some Gutermann thread, number one, you're going to not get the polyester thread that you want. You're going to end up with this 100% rayon. You're going to get a smaller spool or actually you're going to get a larger spool, excuse me. The Sulky brand has a much larger spool as far as thread quantity than the polyester version of the Gutermann. but you're also going to be needing to totally change the setup on your machine so that it will manage this rayon thread properly. Rayon thread is a lot more fragile. It is not the correct thread to be using if you're trying to do quilting. So if you're trying to use 100% rayon thread and you're trying to do quilting, you're going to be a very frustrated sewer because it's going to be constantly breaking on you, constantly breaking. Okay. But the setup that I finally came up with, it seems to be working okay with this 21E Viking Husqvarna from 1961, is I took my upper tension way down because when it was at its normal setting of about 5, that thread was just breaking like that. Every time I would stitch 1 or 2 stitches, it was breaking. The other thing I did is on these green machines, there's a little plastic tab on the bottom that you can swing either way to change the position of your take-up spring. Your spring can either be at the highest position, which is about 11 o'clock, if you're thinking of it like a dial or a clock, or you can move it right around where I have it, almost at the 9 o'clock position by moving that little tab on the bottom. And then there's very little take-up spring movement, which is creating less stress on this very delicate 100% rayon thread, okay? So that's what I would recommend. It's working for me. It might work for you. If you're using 100% rayon, take your upper tension way down, adjust your take-up spring so that it's not creating quite as much range of motion in creating that stitch process. Move it to about the 9 o'clock position instead of closer to the 11 o'clock position. Okay, and that might work for you just as it's working for me. All right. So let's try this revised Cam C and see what we think. Okay. Here we go with revised Cam C, and we're going to be sewing stitch number 4. Stitch number 4. Get my take-up arm all the way up. And I didn't mention it specifically, but I am using this 100% rayon 40 weight embroidery thread. That's 100% rayon again, down in the bobbin as well. So I've got 100% rayon bottom and top. Sometimes people will mix and match. And if they have a beautiful thread that they want to display, they'll run that more delicate thread down in the bobbin case because it has a lot more less movements that it has to go through. It doesn't have to work its way through the presser discs. It doesn't have to work its way past that take-up spring. It's a lot less problematic to run a delicate thread down below than it is up top. But we're using this 100% rayon embroidery thread by Sulky on the bottom and on the top. What can I say? We're rebels, right? We're rebels. We just are. So let's see what we think of this revised Cam C stitching. Here we go. And again, if you didn't hear me mention it, I am holding the power and the speed way back. I'm holding the speed way back on this machine because this thread is so fragile. It's a very fragile thread. Down position, bummer. That's okay. So this is the stitch we just did right here. Kind of an arrowhead stitch or something, or it looks almost like, what is that snack food? Something with the word corn in it, but it kind of reminds me of that corn snack as well. Let me take this off the machine and you can take a closer look at these stitches. Okay, so this is the stitch we just did. Again, this is off of the revised Cam C. You can see kind of what we just laid down there. If I get it up in the shot, you can see it. Again, we could shorten that stitch length even more to give this even greater clarity of stitch. And we could also move from the universal size 80 Schmetz needle we're using right now to the embroidery needle by Schmetz, which is a size 7511. But this is the setup I have right now, and this is the result that we're getting, which I think is actually quite good. It's quite good, especially considering my inexperience working with 100% rayon thread by Sulky out of Germany. So good looking stitch. This again is stitch number 4 on the revised Cam C for this machine. Turn it over, look at that lock stitch. It's a decent lock stitch. Again, I would probably, as I got more familiar with using 100% rayon thread by Sulky, I would tighten up that top stitch, or the lock stitch, excuse me, by turning up our upper tension just slightly. Right now, I've got the upper tension way down to prevent thread breakage. Because again, if you haven't worked with 100% rayon thread, it's a very delicate thread. You can't use it for quilting. You can only use it for very limited applications, but it's ultimately a beautiful looking thread. Oh yeah, bugle. Thank you, Emma. I finally looked at the chat. Yeah, the bugles you can buy in the store. This always reminds me of a bugle, especially when you look at it, this darker red background with this type of sulky thread. It's just a beautiful, beautiful presentation. All right, blah, 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 blah. Let me move over to the next stitch now. All right, presser foot is down. I've got so much room. I don't know why I'm trying to cramp it in there. There we go. So we're going to go to the next stitch now. We just did stitch number 4 on this revised Cam C. You kind of see it from the front as well. Almost kind of resembles a Christmas tree too, doesn't it? Either a bugle if you're hungry like I am, because I really didn't have much in the way of breakfast, or you can look at it as a Christmas tree. But in any case, even this green thread presents so beautifully on this red velvet, doesn't it? I love it. I love the look of this. Again, if you did a tree skirt or something like that, imagine using some of these decorative stitches that are available through this Green Machine series and doing a beautiful tree skirt for your Christmas tree as the holidays approach. It would be spectacular. But right now, let's focus on going to the next stitch. That's what our focus needs to be. So you can see we're on stitch number 4 right now. We need to go to stitch number 3. And again, if you didn't notice that I did it, I took this down to 0 so I can move this slider more easily. Again, when you take it down to 0, that little finger that reads that cam ends up retracting, so you can slide this a much easier. I've actually had machines come in that have been broken because someone didn't realize they had to recalibrate that stitch width, and they forced this, and they actually broke one of the mechanisms in the back. So don't do that. Take this back to 4. Let's do our next stitch. All right, so this again is going to be stitch number 3 on the revised Cam C, And you might not have a revised Cam C with your Swedish Beauty. You might have just a regular Cam C, and that's fine. It's just that Husqvarna decided that they wanted to come out with revisions for some of their cams, and they did it with this one. So, all right, next stitch. Here we go. Again, this velvet material I'm using is polyester and acrylic. And we're using a size 80 Schmetz universal needle. I really would be curious, and I probably will. I would be curious to see how this thread, this rayon, 100% rayon thread would perform with an embroidery needle, which I'll probably end up trying. Move my hand out of the way. It's trying to focus on my hand, I think. But I think that's some lovely stitching. I don't know what you would call this stitch. Is it a building block type stitch, do you think? The one we just sewed on the left. Kind of like a building block, isn't it? Let me take it out. We'll take a closer look at it. Again, if you've never worked with this type of thread before, I can tell you there's a fast learning curve with it. After you break it and 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 break it. Even when I went from trying to use my most treasured favorite needle, when I tried to go from the 9014 Schmetz Universal and I stepped it down to the 80 Universal, I still had thread breaking issues with this 100% rayon thread by Sulky. But we finally have a setup right now with that upper tension tamed way back. And by adjusting the range of motion for our take-up spring, we have a solution at least where we are able to use this thread successfully without continuously and constantly and relentlessly breaking the stuff. So, at any rate, stitch number 4, stitch number 3 on the revised Cam C is what we're looking at right now on the screen. Sort of looking at. Yeah, for the most part. Some real nice stitching, very, very nice stitching. If we flip it over, we're getting some decent results from our lock stitch. But again, because I have that upper tension turned so far back so that I'm not constantly breaking this 100% rayon thread with our current setup, either one of these stitch rows could be tightened up even more by bumping up that upper tension. And it would be very gradual just to see how far can we push this 100% rayon 40 weight Sulky thread before it starts breaking again. Because that really is the challenge with this particular 100% rayon thread. It's very, very delicate stuff. Okay, so there you go. Let's go to our next stitch, which is going to be stitch number 2, I believe, on the revised Cam C, stitch number 2. And I'll just leave the camera shot right here and I'll do the adjustments off screen. You've seen me do it several times. I'm taking that stitch width all the way down to 0, which allows me to move that slider more readily to position 2. And then I'm taking that stitch width and bringing it back to 4 from 0. Okay. So with all that blah, blah, blahing, we'll find a little bit more music to put on potentially. And hold on just a second. I use Norton with this computer, and it's got a big update thing on the front right now blocking me from going on to doing what I want to do. Hold on a second. All right, I'm just going to choose that. North Oakland Ecstasy is the name of this next song. I haven't been sharing the names of songs with you very much because I've been using the library function, and it just goes sequentially, song by song, very rapidly, and I just can't keep looking back and telling you what the title is. So you'll just have to be flexible with me. All right, our next stitch again is stitch number 2 on revised Cam C on this 1961 Viking Husqvarna 21E that belongs to Mary Schmartz out of the great state of Michigan. All right, let's do this next stitch. And let's hope that our good fortune holds out as we sew this velvet material that again is a blend of polyester and acrylic using this 100% rayon Sulky embroidery thread. I hope we can finish off these last stitches without the stuff breaking like it did so often when I was trying to get familiar with it. All right, here we go. And again, I'm keeping the speed way down. Up position. I love it. And I don't know if I mentioned specifically, but I did buy this Sulky thread at Joann Fabrics. So I know it's available at Joann's if you want to try it out. Now, I think Emma sometimes calls this one that we just sewed on the far left there, the eyebrow one or something like that. But that's the one that we just sewed right there. Again, this is off of the revised Cam C on this 1961 21E. And if you're just joining the live stream, we're using 100% rayon embroidery thread by Sulky out of Germany. They are the mirror and match of the Gutermann people. Matter of fact, their thread stacks look exactly the same. So we're trying this out. It's a tricky thread to work with. You've really got to change the setup of your machine quite a bit in order to have success, because this thread will constantly break on you if you've got either too much take-up spring movement or you've got too much upper tension. So just be aware of that if you decide to try it. All right, let's take a look at this stitch a little bit closer up. I like this stitch quite a bit. It's a lovely, lovely stitch. And again, the material that we're stitching on is going to be a mix of polyester and acrylic. It's going to be a ribbon velvet material that originally was sold at the Target stores back in the early 2000s. And I don't have it lined up quite right, do I? Hold on a second. I'll get it right eventually. Move that back a little bit further, give me a little bit more room to work with. So there you can kind of see the stitching that we've done so far. Again, we're using the revised Cam C in the back of the machine. We're sewing on what is a mix of polyester and acrylic velvet ribbon material. And we're using 100% rayon embroidery thread by Sulky. It's rated at 40 weight, but I'll tell you one thing, for being rated at 40 weight, it breaks just in a blink if you decide to become too aggressive with that upper tension. So, well, we're getting some good stitch results with this. And again, whenever you're dealing with a trickier material or a trickier thread like we are today with this embroidery thread by Sulky, 100% rayon stuff, it's usually a better rule, if you're able to do it, to put that trickier thread down into the raceway area in the bobbin, because thread that is moving through the machine going through the bobbin has a lot less obstacles it has to go through than when you're feeding it from the top through the upper tension, through those pressure discs, going over that take-up spring, and then being wound up through the take-up arm and all the way eventually down to the needle. It's got to navigate a lot more paths when you're using a tricky thread up top than if you're using it down below. The same thing is true of heavier threads. If you're deciding you want to try certain upholstery threads or maybe some Kevlar threads, it's a lot easier to use that trickier thread down in the bobbin. And then what you could elect to do if you wanted to have a really pretty top stitch, say with some pretty Sulky 100% rayon thread like this, then you could always run that material through basically upside down, so that all of a sudden that bobbin thread is going to become your top thread on the material project you're working with. And I've made that recommendation to a number of customers where they're working with a tricky thread or a heavier thread, or just a thread that doesn't generally feed well going through those that upper tension into those pressure discs. Run it in the bottom, and then just run your material upside down going over the feed dogs. You can end up with a beautiful top stitch that really, we know it really came from the bobbin case, but you didn't have to fight all those battles, if that makes sense. So, but at any rate, this is revised Cam C, some beautiful stitching, and also some solid lock stitching as well. Although, especially with this plastic backing on the back of this velvet, I would look to push my luck a little bit, push that upper tension up a little bit higher, and see how much we could tighten this up without that thread beginning to break again. Make sense? Cool. All right. So let's do our next stitch, which is going to be our final stitch on revised cam C. And that is going to be my stopping point for this live stream. At that point, we will have gone through revised cam A, cam B, cam C, and then also revised cam C as well. So we will have tested 4 cams on this 1961 Viking Husqvarna 21E that belongs to Mary from Michigan. And that'll make me really confident that we've given this Sulky 100% rayon 40 weight thread a fair try, and that we've come up with a setup that is successful, which we have at this point. So let's give this final stitch a go. I've got to bring it to that final stitch first. And again, just for, they say in a classroom, repetition is the key as we're learning something. So let's be repetitive, and I'll show you again when you're changing this slider to go from one stitch to another. Again, if you're joining this live stream late, on these green machines, position 5 on the cam is always going to be a zigzag. And you always have a black cam in the back of these green machines because it sets needle swing so you're not hitting the throat plate and causing scarring. It also gives you needle swing capacity. If you try operating one of these machines without a cam in the back and you set this stitch width, from 0 to 4, you're still not going to be getting any needle swing. And you're all of a sudden going to wonder, is the machine broken? It's not broken. You need to have a cam in the back to set those swing boundaries and to give this machine the capacity to have needle swing, whether you want to do an embroidery style stitch like one of these, or you want to do a simple zigzag. So just be aware of that. Be aware that the cam has to be in the back all the time for a variety of reasons, and to keep you from scarring that throat plate. And then all of a sudden, as that thread should be flowing nicely coming out of the bobbin case, creating that sewing process, it's going to be caught on those little barbs of metal where that needle has struck the throat plate repeatedly, and you're going to be having all kinds of issues, which you don't want to have, right? You don't want to have that. So take this down to 0. We're going to move it to position 1, and we're going to sew off our final stitch on this revised cam C. And I got to remember to take this back to position 4 on stitch width, otherwise we're going to have a mess. All right, let's adjust the camera so you can kind of see what we've done already, which is some beautiful stitching. Again, this is revised cam C. If you have one of these, try it out. It does a brilliant job. It does a brilliant job. And now we're going to be doing the final stitch on that cam C that's revised. All right, here we go. Up position again. Boy, is it a banner day. It is a banner day when you can end up in the up position that many times. That many times. So again, we just did our final stitch, which is actually stitch number 1. I kind of do them out of order, right? I do them out of order. But you can see here, the first stitch we did, stitch number 4, which is kind of the bugle stitch or the Christmas tree stitch, depending on how you want to look at it, I guess. Then we did stitch number 3, stitch number 2, the eyebrow stitch. And then we just did stitch number 1, our final stitch there. Absolutely drop dead gorgeous stitching. Cam C, the revised Cam C, has some spectacular stitches, and they're going to be similar to the Cam C. We can actually look at them side by side and just see how they potentially differ. But that was up to Husqvarna, right? Husqvarna decided that as they developed these cams, which are absolutely brilliant engineering, they decided to make revisions of them. And so we had the privilege, since Mary had it, she sent it with the machine. We had a chance to try this revised Cam C. And I'll mark this as C and then the little I next to it to show that it's a revised Cam C. But gorgeous stitching. Let's take it out so we can look at it and we can check out that lock stitch again. Again, I've got the upper tension so far down so we can use this 100% rayon thread by Sulky, which again is rated at 40 weight. I'm a little bit skeptical about that rating, to be honest with you, because 40 weight thread generally is going to be rated even higher than what most Coats and Clark's over-the-counter type threads are. And this stuff is just because of its engineering, its science of being a rayon thread. It's rated at 40, but it's a lot more prone to breaking. It's a lot more prone to breaking, folks. And if you never tried it, you can see what I mean. If you try it, you'll be like, yeah, absolutely. This stuff is like working with eggshells. So there you can see the totality of the stitching that we did with the revised Cam C, and it's gorgeous. Our first row on top is stitch number 4. Then we did stitch number 3, stitch number 2, and finally, wait a second. No, switch that, reverse that. I had it upside down. You're probably looking at it going, what? I thought that was, stitch number 4 on top, stitch number 3, stitch number 2, the eyebrow stitch, and then stitch number 1 on the bottom. We kind of did them out of order, but that's okay. So some gorgeous stitching with revised Cam C. And now if you're curious, well, how does revised Cam C differ from Cam C, if at all? Let's take a look at them side by side now. That would be kind of fun, huh? But I'll mark this one first so I don't forget that this is revised Cam C. So I'll put a C and then a little Roman numeral 1 or an I next to it to show that it's a revised cam. So let me reach in the back and grab Cam C. We'll put them side by side. You can see them and decide how they differ from each other. Okay? And I'll come with a front shot so you can see it more easily. Okay. So there you're looking at Cam C on the right. You're looking at revised Cam C on the left. And I'll put this down and actually set the camera down so I can stop jiggling it. All right, stop jiggling it, Scott. Stop jiggling it. So you can see that there might be some benefit if you currently say, let's say you have cams ABC for your green machine. There may be some benefit, although they're like finding a unicorn, people. They really are. Finding any of these black cams is like finding a unicorn. They're really tough to find. And yes, I do have some. And yes, you could potentially purchase them from me, but I'm not going to give that shameless plug, although I think I just did. So, so at any rate, if you like bugle type patterns, the revised Cam C offers that. And you can look at them as easily as I can and see how they differ. But there lies the benefit in, if you have cams A, B, and C, looking and seeing if you can somehow acquire the revised Cam A, the revised Cam B, the revised Cam C, because you will have some additional options potentially. They might be only modest, but you might have some additional options. Yeah, I agree, Emma. I kind of like the revised Cam C as well. And it's partly because I don't buy them very often. And since I didn't have much breakfast and it's already getting close to lunch, it's actually past lunch, I might be inclined to say, hey, you know what? The revised Cam C is going to give me that bugle stitch pattern, and then I'll be more inclined to buy more bugles. Yeah, that could be a motivation, right? But all of these are great patterns, don't you think? I mean, look at the revised Cam 4A over there. I can come back further and show that as well. This is the revised Cam A right there. They're all spectacular, aren't they? And that's why people love Swedish beauties. That's why they love Swedish beauties. They just do. And I'm not talking about girls. I'm talking, well, they love those too, but I'm talking about the stitching. It's just spectacular. And especially when we're using this 100% rayon sulky 40 weight thread. It is a booger to try to set up a machine for this stuff. But once you get this set up and you're using the material that you intend to use, like if I'm going to make a tree skirt, right? Then I've got this velvet and it's perfect. It's spectacular. And then if I look at all these stitches and I go, well, they are spectacular, but what I really would love to do is I would love to get some of those stitches that are on cam B. I want to do stitches that are on cam B. No problem. Let me lower the presser foot and we'll line all of these up next to each other. And I'll try to come back far enough that we can see all of them in totality. Like right there, once I get it right. So on the far right, we're looking at the revised cam A. Then right next to that, we're looking at cam C. Then the second from the left, we're looking at revised cam C. And then finally on the far left, we're looking at cam B. And realize this, okay? Realize this. If you're looking at this and going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that those green machines could do all of that. I didn't know it. Who knew? This is only whetting your appetite, folks. This is only whetting your appetite because there's a revised cam B that we didn't have a chance to test because we don't have it with Mary's stuff. There's also going to be a regular cam A that would be like this one, similar to it. Plus, there's going to be a cam D. Remember, I mailed one to Hans because he couldn't find one over in Norway. I've got more cam Ds that we could also test on this 1961 21E. I also have the unicorn of unicorns. I also have a cam E as well. Try to find a cam E anywhere in the world other than the workshop. Good luck. Good luck. But it gives you an idea of if you wanted the absolute full set of cams for one of these green machines. Okay, if you wanted the absolute full set, you would have to have a cam A, a revised cam A, a cam B, a revised cam B, a cam C, a revised cam C, a cam D, a revised cam D, and a cam E, and a revised cam E. You guys know that I am horrible at math. How many cams is that? All in all. Somebody do the math. One of you math wizards. How many cams would we end up with to have an absolute complete set for one of these green machines? Again, A, B, C, D, E, but then we would need all of the revisions of those cams as well. Gregory has a theory. What do you guys think of Gregory's theory? Gregory has a theory on why they did the revision. I love the insights of all of you. You guys are all absolutely brilliant. And that's why I say, yeah, I guess technically I'm the teacher, but I'm also a student because I constantly learn and get insights from all of you. Thank you for that because it makes me better. And I remember this is going way back, but I remember when I interviewed, I can't even keep the camera straight, you guys. I'm sorry about that. When I interviewed Paula, when she was assuming that role that she did for a while as a Facebook moderator, now she's a YouTube moderator along with Emma and Bill and Sunny, right? But when I interviewed her, she talked about a horrible experience she had as a student where she was in a sewing class and she had a teacher that thought that they were God. That teacher in that sewing class, when Paula was in school back in the day, thought that they couldn't learn from anyone. And when Paula, you guys remember this, that interview I did with Paula? When Paula took the initiative to try to repair some of the machines that were down so that more of the students could participate in the class, she got chastised by that teacher. What a horrible teacher. for any teacher, whether they've got a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, or an MOUSC. For any teacher to think that they can't learn, they might as well give up teaching, because they, in my opinion, are useless at that point, because they think that they have all the answers. You never, ever have all the answers. And Gregory just gave a great insight as to why he feels they came out with the revised cams. Thank goodness for all of you that step out of the shadows and give your brilliance and give your insights, because it makes us all better. In my opinion, it makes us all better. But look at these, even with this little sampling. Oh, wait, who's got an E? Who's got a cam E? Who is that? Who's got a cam E? That is so cool. Who is somebody 78? Somebody 78 has a cam E. That is, you better call Brinks. Call Brinks right now. Somebody Google the number for Brinks so that our friend that their screen name ends in 78 can have adequate protection for that cam E that they have. Because cam E's are the unicorn of unicorns when it comes to the cams for these green machines. They just are. But even the cams that we were able to put to the test today, again, with our setup that we have, our setup is this very tricky Sulky embroidery thread that's 100% rayon and is rated at 40 weight. And then we tested cam A revised, cam C revised, and cam B. Yeah, that's what we tested today, you guys, which is fun, right? I had fun. And now I set it down because I'm like, I don't want to hold it up anymore. What did Emma write? Emma, that's not a teacher, that's a dictator. Yeah. I agree. What did you guys remember my quote by Aristotle? Aristotle was thought to be a pretty smart dude in his day, right? He was a pretty smart guy. You guys remember my quote that I gave you of his about intelligence and blah, 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 and all that stuff? You remember that? Do you remember that? I don't know if you remember that or not. Let me move this back so I don't have to hold the camera up, but you can still look at all these cool stitches that we did today. Oh, hey, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. So Michelle has a very rare cam, you guys. She's got a very rare cam with this eCam, and she doesn't actually have to call Brinks, but why not? Give Brinks a call anyway and see what they would charge to protect your eCam. I'd just be curious to know. And the next live stream or premiere we do, if Michelle would jump back on and say, okay, I actually called them. I didn't give my name, but I gave Brinks a call and I tried to explain to them what a cam E is for a Viking Husqvarna green machine. It took about 45 minutes before they finally understood sort of what I was saying. And then they told me, okay, if you want an armed officer to protect your E-cam, this is what it's going to cost per hour. Just in case you want to sign a contract with us, Michelle, and protect your E-cam. Now, that Scott guy in Wisconsin has more than one eCam. I won't disclose how many I have, and has more than one DCam, and has a number of the other cams. Yeah, Mr. Bean, where are you? I want you to call. Brinks right now. Use Dr. Singer's cell phone and find out what they'll charge us to protect all of our cams. Would you do that? Yeah, I'd like to know. I'd like to know. I would. Oh, okay, yeah. Michelle has Norwegian roots. Have you ever been to Norway, Michelle? Just curious. And Michelle has been in premieres and live streams before. She's been in premieres for sure. And one time I had a customer's machine on the workbench, and that customer's name was Michelle. And this Michelle that's on right now, Michelle 78, jumped on and she said, so people wouldn't get confused and right away think, oh, that's the owner of the machine. She said, I'm not the owner of the machine, but my name is Michelle too, but it's spelled differently than Scott's customer. You guys remember that? I remember that. Ooh, we've got a new person on the live stream. How cool. Welcome, favored one. Welcome. Welcome. And favored one also has a Cam E. This is just confirming something. The smartest, the most talented, and the most resourceful people in the world jump onto this channel, either in a live stream or during a premiere in the live chat, because we have 3 people now that are part of this live stream that have Cam E's. If I counted right, we've got Michelle, we've got favored one, and we have me that have Cam E's. Folks, I'm not making it up. Go anywhere on the internet. Go anywhere on the internet and try to find a Cam E for sale. Go ahead and try to find it. Or find a Cam D. Even try to find a Cam A, B, or C, or a revised version of one of those cams. These cams are so doggone hard to find. They really are. But if you can find them, look at what they can generate right there. Mr. Bean, did you already call Brinks? Well, go call Brinks, man. So our friend Michelle has not gone to Norway yet, but that's where our friend Hans lives. And Hans and I, Hans had some health challenges. Most of you that have followed me faithfully know that. I love the guy to death. He's a dear friend of mine, and yet life gets busy, doesn't it? Life gets busy. He's busy on his end because he teaches at the university near his home. He's involved in other things as well. He's running his farm. And so we've had a bit of a disconnect, which I'm kind of bummed about. But Norway is a place that I would love to visit. And Hans and I, when we were in regular, constant contact, he said, Scott, anytime you come to Norway, you can stay with my family on the farm. And he's a stand-up guy. And even though we've had some disconnect and he's not involved with my Facebook page like he was before, I have no doubt that he would honor that invitation even now. And I would love to go see Norway sometime. Maybe Michelle and I can tag team it and can get some other people gathered together, kind of like we talked about doing with the History Museum down in South Bend, Indiana, that we did the fundraiser for. And if you're brand new to this channel, you're saying, what fundraiser? What are you talking about? Whenever we hit a milestone in this channel and we get 1,000 more subscribers, I always try to do a contest with a sewing machine giveaway, and periodically try to do a fundraiser as well. We just finished a fundraiser for the local Humane Society here in Oconto, Wisconsin, and we had a great success there. We set a goal of $5,000 for them. It's a small Humane Society in my hometown here. We set a small goal of $5,000. I guess that's not a small goal, is it? $5,000 is a lot of money. But we set a goal of $5,000. And in the end, we ended up going $1,400 above that goal. We ended up with $6,400. And a number of you in this live chat right now supported that cause and became heroes for Hank. And thank you again for doing that. Thank you again for supporting a local Humane Society, for adopting a local Humane Society and making a huge difference for them. But we did the same thing for that History Museum down in South Bend, Indiana. We didn't start with a specific goal, but we ended up raising over $11,000 for them in 11 days. You hear me? $11,000 in 11 days. That just shows the fabric of folks like all of you right now in this live stream. You guys are top shelf. You guys are the best of the best. And I really am grateful, and I love you all for supporting causes that I believe in. What happened? My memory's amazing. Mr. Bean is laughing off camera right now, saying, "No way, man! You don't have an amazing memory, Scott. Your memory's horrible." May I be so forward as to ask favored one? May I be so forward as to ask favored one, where are you located? Would you be so kind as to share that? I would be grateful. I love to know where our family is from. I consider this like family. All of you are family. I love to know where you folks are from. So anyone that's willing to share that, your country, your state, you don't give your address. Please don't give your address on a live stream. But if you want to share where you're located, that would be super cool. Yeah. Well, I agree with you totally, Michelle. $5,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And this incredible family of ours, who always says, Scott, if you believe in a cause, we believe in it, man. We believe in causes you believe in. We trust you. We love you. If you put a cause in front of us, we're going to find every opportunity. And again, it's not equal giving, right? It's equal sacrifice. So some of our heroes for Hank in this last campaign, they just went off the hook and said, I'm not only going to support this, I'm going to support it in a crazy way. And some of our family did that, which is awesome. It's awesome. Again, all of us have different resources, right? And we have different events that come up in our life, and those events will tap into our resources. I have some of that going on in my life right now that's tapping into my resources. And so whenever someone sends another machine to the workshop or drops one off, since this is my livelihood, this is what I do full time. I am so grateful for every single customer that entrusts their machine to me, whether they're in Canada, Germany, Australia, or New Jersey, or California, or Colorado, or wherever they come from. Every one of those is a blessing to me, so I'm very grateful for it. But Mr. Bean is MI5. He really is, and he doesn't like to be known. He likes to stay off the radar. Mr. Bean, you're on the radar. Mr. Bean, you're on the radar. So, but at any rate, our friend favored one didn't share where they're located, but maybe they will at some point. I'd just be curious to know. It's fun to know that in a live stream or on a premiere with live chat, we have people oftentimes from all over the place. Our one Dr. T friend is from Finland. And it's just fun to have a family that big, isn't it? I mean, I come from a relatively small family. I've got one brother who's 4 years older than I am, but many of you might come from much bigger families. But this is our family too on this channel. So it's just fun to know, hey, we've got family over in Norway. We've got family in Finland. We've got family in Germany. We've got family all over the place. If any of you have watched some of my recent premieres or live streams and you've seen that intro video that I sometimes will present with my friend from Germany that shows some of the machines that he has in his collection. Some of you have seen that. I know you have. He recently reached out to me and he's looking at sending me a machine to basically restore. I think it's paint, decals, everything. Guess what model it is? Throw some guesses out as to what model my friend from Germany is planning on or hoping to plan to send to the workshop for me to do a full restore of brand new paint, brand new decals, the works. What kind of machine do you think it is coming from Germany to the workshop in Oconto? And again, if you haven't seen that, I use it as a trailer sometimes with some of the premieres, and it shows these beautiful machines. It shows a picture of him at the beginning. His first name is, I hope I don't get it wrong or I'll totally mess things up. I won't give his first name. I think it's Robert. Any rate, my friend from Germany, what kind of machine do you think he's looking at sending to the workshop? Come on, somebody guess. We got 3 people on the live stream right now. We've been going up and down the whole live stream. No guesses? No guesses what my friend from Germany is looking at sending to the workshop for a full restore? I'll wait a little bit before I tell you. Okay, I waited long enough. My friend from Germany is looking at sending a 222K to the workshop for a full restore. My very first 222K ever to be sitting on one of my workbenches actually came from Florida. Does anyone know who sent it? Who sent the very first 222? That's tricky to say. who sent the first 222K to the workshop, and I made a big deal out of it. The machine's name is Bandit. Bandit. Who sent that machine? Anyone know? Boy, we're just trickling down. Now we're to two. Now we're down to two on the live stream. We've been way up there, and now we're way down there. Of course, this has run longer than I expected, but that's all well and good. Okay. Well, if you don't know, that particular 222K, that was the first one in the workshop, came from Maddie out of Florida. And Maddie named her 222K Bandit. Now, if you're brand new to VSM and you're saying 222 what? If you don't know what a 222K is, it's about as rare as these black cams for machines like Mary's, like this 21E from 1961. Okay? A 222K is the featherweight free arm version that came out in the 1950s. Okay? And they only made about 100,000 of them. 100,000 of them over 8 years of production. That tells you how rare that machine is. And that's what my friend from Germany is looking at, sending in all likelihood to the workshop for me to work on it for him and to do a full restore. That'll be fun. I'm gonna make a big deal out of that. I make a big deal out of all of my customers' machines, which I think they enjoy. Which one of us doesn't enjoy, feeling really good about an investment that we made and then having everyone celebrate that investment with us? That's the good stuff, isn't it? So, at any rate, I will wrap up this live stream because I am just at a point of blah, blah, blahing. And Mr. Bean still hasn't gotten back to me on what Brinks would charge us to protect our black cams for the Husqvarnas that we have, the Husqvarna cams. So, I'm being a cat herder. I have no idea what that is, but I didn't know you could herd cats. I thought cats did their own thing. They do their own thing, and you try to hurt them, they're going to rebel. They're going to rebel, right? So, at any rate, thanks for joining me for this live stream. I didn't announce this live stream, so everyone that did jump on, even if you had to jump off, because it's kind of in the middle of the day, I get that. And you got other things happening in your life. You might even be at work when you're jumping onto one of these live streams, which is incredible dedication and requires that I ring the bell in your honor. Plus, that'll signify the end of this live stream, finally. And but thanks again to everybody that jumped on. I hope you'll join other live streams like this. I hope you'll join other premieres where we have a live chat where we can still, engage with each other. It's not at the same level of real time, but it's still real time chat nonetheless, even if I pre-shoot the video for some of these machines, which I sometimes do to be more accommodating to the customer, because some customers can't attend a live stream of their machine during the day. So I do pre-shoot video sometimes, and then I do the live chat, which is also cool. But here's what we did. Again, knocking everything off of the bed of the machine. Here's what we did on this live stream today to test out this 100% rayon, Sulky, German-made embroidery, 40 weight sewing thread. Boy, that's a lot to say. Oh my gosh, I feel exhausted. But we tested this Sulky 40 weight embroidery, 100% rayon thread today. It's a tough thread to work with, but we ultimately had success on this 1961 21E that belongs to Mary from Michigan. And I am so excited. I'm almost puffing these things right off of the free arm of this 1961 machine. I am. So, but, so Michelle says she has naughty felines. That's kind of intriguing, isn't it? She's got naughty cats. I thought all cats were naughty, and I'm not a cat owner. But any of my friends that are cat owners say that cats are naughty all the time. They're naughty. They're naughty little felines. They are. But Michelle has ultra naughty kitties. She does. So y'all keep Michelle in thought and prayer as she manages and tries to herd these naughty furry friends of hers, these kitty cats. Okay. All right. Well, Mary, I know you'll see this eventually. The fact that your 21E from 1961 can manage this very tricky Sulky embroidery 100% rayon 40 weight thread is noteworthy. It's noteworthy. It just is. So thank you to everyone that joined this live stream today. Like I said, and I mean it, you guys are the best of the best. You are top shelf, and I appreciate you. I love you all. And thank you so much for encouraging me in the work that I do. And that encouragement comes in a lot of ways. It might be through an email, it might be through a note, it might be from jumping on a live stream like this, it might be from attending a premiere. Who knows what it is? But thank you for that encouragement. It goes a long, long, long way. It just does. Mr. Bean, really? Come on, man. You called Brinks and they hung up on you? That's not cool. That's not cool. They said they didn't know what a cam was? Well, they don't work on cars either then, do they? No, they don't. Well, thanks for checking, man. I appreciate it. Take care, everybody. I'm going to end this live stream right about now.